And with the idea of placing primary sources, everything happens somewhere, is our teacher authors created some phenomenal projects that cross through time and integrate maps where something happened and maps that could also further inform the topic under consideration. And today is Cold War Day. And we just happen to have one of our primary source journals. And I have the link somewhere in the chat box, but I need to find the chat box again, so I'll put it up later. So 11 primary source story maps were created. And this is a brief overview of them: geography's impact, the American Expeditionary Forces, the Progressives, and Cold War conflict. So from this page, we created a website to host our materials. And the first page gives an overview. It talks to the students, and we hope that the students will perchance click on one of these by clicking on the I to launch the Story Map Journal. However, teachers need additional materials. So we have teaching resources. And each of the story maps comes with a short overview. And then I guess I should look at the Cold War one as we go slowly through them. We have our authors named, and students get to analyze documents, videos, photographs in a geographic context. So this is the page that accompanies the Cold War. There is a background essay decorated with primary source images, and there is a link to the Story Map Journal itself, and this is probably the best way to get it. You can share the link with your students, a student response guide, and the teacher materials that has the key to the student response guide and the lesson plan. And all of these are produced in 3 formats: PDF if you don't want to make any changes, Google Doc, and a Word. And so these could be duplicated or hosted online, since they all have PDFs, not PDFs, URLs. And it was quite an interesting project. So look at the topics. And they span, so even though we're going through the Cold War, goes all the way through Afghanistan. The placing immigration goes all the way through the controversial wall with the border of Mexico. Civil rights goes all the way through the Me Too movement. So you might be selective in pieces that you would want your students to view. Okay, Chris, you ready to do the Cold War? Okay, now I can launch my bit.ly. So the bit.ly's in the chat box.
So I'm going to make Chris the host now and allow Chris to share his screen. Does that work for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Chris, you have hosting and screen sharing abilities.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of what Andy and Georgianne have shared about the placing primary sources collection, GeoInquiry has really served as a stepping stone to the placing primary sources partnership between the Virginia Geographic Alliance and Library of Congress. As we started to work with the GeoInquiries and teach them, people would provide comments on, wouldn't it be great if this was a story map, or wouldn't it be great, as Andy was saying, that you drop in these videos? So where GeoInquiries are designed to be completed in 15 to 20 minutes, and then teachers may go on and build upon them, we partnered with Library of Congress to build upon them and to create the collection. A few things to note: Georgianne designed this fantastic website. Notice that there's a section for students, and then there's the section for teachers at the bottom, and that's where you can access the lesson in multiple formats. We realize that sometimes teachers follow scripts, but most often teachers don't have a script. We also encouraged our teacher authors to build beyond the parameters of the topic you're teaching. You're going to be in here once, and when you're doing GIS work, the lion's share of the work is data creation and map creation. So a shout out to all of our authors. These were designed by teachers for teachers who shared their experiences and what they would like in curriculum and pass it on to you. As Georgianne said, when you click on the teacher site, it will bring you to different landing pages for the materials. And when you click on the Placing Cold Wars Conflict, it brings you to this collection, and to launch the story map, you just click on Story Map Journal, and then you launch the images. And what you'll notice is that the Story Map Journal pops up. A Story Map Journal operates a lot like a PowerPoint. It's just far more dynamic because you can embed in these live maps, and you have a side panel on the left-hand side and a main stage. And you'll notice that because it was a partnership with Library of Congress, you will see, if you're familiar with teaching with primary sources techniques, you'll see those techniques embedded in the story map. So one technique that Library of Congress likes to use is the observe, reflect, and question. And wherever possible, the authors use Library of Congress primary sources. However, periodically, the resources had to come from other archives, such as the JFK Library and so forth. So when you click on a section, you can arrow up or down and follow the script. The lessons come with teacher and student guides as well as answer keys. Then you work your way through the story. And this brings up the map layers that Andy was sharing with you in the GeoInquiry. The nice thing is the GeoInquiry maps and the layers were created under Creative Commons. So we were able to bring in some of the greatest hits from Esri's GeoInquiries and incorporate them into the story map. You can zoom in on an area. If we zoom in, you can have students look at what was the purpose of the Potsdam Conference, but also look at the map in different ways. It's another nice thing about GeoInquiry or GIS maps. They're scalable on the fly. So we can look at how Germany was partitioned. Then we can also look specifically at how the capital of Berlin was partitioned, and to look at the fact that it is surrounded by the Soviet occupational area of Germany following World War II. And then we have some map notes dropped in here that students follow that through, and they can actually analyze the primary source to see a Library of Congress image from the Berlin airlift. And then you work your way to the next section, and it talks about, okay, let's look at the Iron Curtain, and asking you to look at, if you'd like, you could have the students watch. Give me just a second. You can click here to see Winston Churchill's speech mentioning the Iron Curtain. So similar to what Andy was talking about with the GeoInquiry, here we are. You can use this activity. I like to say GIS maps are like accordion maps. You can go ahead and play the entire song if you want. You can have it stretched out, and this could take you a few days. When I've used this in my world history and US history classes, it takes up the bulk of the learning for the Cold War. Other times, though, if snow days have piled up and I don't have as much time, I might pick a piece of this story map and have students work with it. So definitely feel free to modify how you use these in your classroom. Then we look at other conflicts and another primary source, this one having students to analyze the Truman Doctrine, the role of the Marshall Plan, and analyzing this political cartoon here. Then we look at the establishment of NATO and the Warsaw Pact, and having them look at different hotspots of the Cold War. You'll see that also in here there's an embedded description of NATO, and really at this point, hopefully you're noticing that the teachers that created these really became geohistorians. They mined the archives, they married up the right GIS layers, conducted historical research. Georgianne served as the master GIS Jedi for the project, where she was the main cartographer to make these maps interact the way they were. So it was a real team effort, but it was really taking the talents and the tools and the skills of many folks. But at the heart of it were teachers being the historian and the curriculum author. One of the pieces that I like the most in this story map is to work our way down to it's America Intervention. Let me get to that one. So here's looking at the Cuban Missile Crisis itself. And to select a map inquiry, and you can notice that there's a document that you can drop down to follow to use this app. And it goes through and it asks you to watch the video. It shows you different images of the famous images that the aerial images of the Cuban Missile sites. As you zoom out, you start to see different map nodes pop up with different things with regards to JFK, the hotline being created.
Hey,
And then,
Chris, if we
yes,
could look at something back to that previous one.
okay,
And I discovered when I was reviewing today, the map inquiry takes you through some things, but we have my favorite Nike sites.
okay,
So this is an interactive map app. So if you go over to the stack of papers in the upper right,
oh, that's right, yep.
there are some extra layers. And these are the Nike sites. I grew up with them. They were U.S. defensive missiles. And if you could zoom in on some. And I thought that there was just one Nike site protecting a major city, but all of them were ringed with key cities. So that could be a discussion of which cities would you want to protect. And then there also is the idea of, oh, did we have missiles pointed at Russia? So if you look at the Turkey buffers, the Turkey and Italy, sounds like lunch. And zoom 2, oh my, no wonder the Soviets might have been concerned. Okay, thank you, Chris.
No, great thing. Totally just was about to glaze over that. I knew they were in the story map somewhere, but I didn't know exactly where. So that's, again, that's showing you how far you and in depth you can go. And this is another activity. So maybe this is a story map that you use over, I mean, you would use over a series of days, but again, maybe you cherry pick those aspects that fit your teaching style, what you think your students are interested in. One thing I thought was pretty interesting with looking at the Nike sites, and I remember this the last time I looked at it, is that if you look at Philadelphia, it just looks like the Betsy Ross flag when you look at the sites around Philadelphia there. I wonder if they actually thought about that as they were placing them around there. I wonder if there were 13 of them. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There might be. We need to move on because I could digress, and that would
Okay,
be.
and the other thing to remind you, today I made the map inquiry a color, so you say, oh, that's where the Nike sites are hiding. Okay, Chris.
So this is interesting. I found that's really powerful. Sometimes just a map can be so powerful based on just turning on and off layers. And so this one shows you just this one little map about just where was communism influential during the Cold War, and then where did the United States intervene. And so when you click on U.S. Cold War intervention countries, it shows you areas that the United States intervened, and as you click on each country, it gives you a short map pop-up. So it shows you wouldn't cover every single one, but you can ask students to scatter shoot around here and say, look at these other things. Again, the nice thing, we've shared this in a previous webinar, the nice thing about these maps is you get to teach those pieces of information that don't fit into the textbook, don't fit into the curriculum. You're just putting in there as part of the activity. It's not like giving them an encyclopedia to have to read about everything or another specific book. Interestingly, also, you can choose the pop-up for Cold War conflicts. And as you click on each one, it brings up a primary source attached to different Cold War hotspots around. So often we cover some of the major hotspots, but we don't necessarily have the time to cover others. So this is an opportunity to assign to students, go to another hotspot besides the 3 that are on our standards of learning checklist and report back to us what else did you learn about the Cold War and how the United States and the Soviet Union were having a Cold War by having these hotspots, but not a full-blown war. Then it works to looking at focusing on Afghanistan, which can connect to modern day events. And then you work your way down to the Cold War coming to an end, and you can click on this link right here and have the students read about President Reagan's story of tearing down, Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall. And then it works to the end where you click on the sources. And I like the way the story map and the author chose to end, because so many times this is the map my students have to learn, just this. These very generalized colors of democracy, communism, you got it, great, checkbox. But the truth is, as we go back to the engagement through proxy, no, there's a lot more going on with the blue dots, or the blue areas and the red areas. And we can do that with these different scalable episodes, events, and people that were involved in it. So if we go to the Western Hemisphere, we can look at the different conflicts and spots. And let me go back to that and just find out that what was the United States role in Bolivia? We assisted raids on a cocaine region, and we intervened in 1986. In 1947, we intervened in Uruguay. Uh, Bombers deployed as a show of strength. What was the threat? It was a nuclear threat. Go over into Central America. What was the role in Honduras? We maneuvered to help build bases near the borders. All these small things that often get glazed over when this is the only thing that we expect this is the only thing we expect our students to know. And so this is the Cold War story map. We ask you to shrink it or expand it in the ways that fit with your needs during these unprecedented times, and then when you return to normal with your classrooms. So thank you. And go ahead, Georgianne.
Okay, while you're on the map, could you hit the item details page, please?
Yes.
So if you were going through the story map and you said, oh, I want that cartoon of Stalin and the basketball, all 99% of the sources that were used in the story map are linked here. So you could go to the Library of Congress and just download that one. I gotta have that image to teach this topic. Okay,
So,
that concludes my comment.
Yeah, no, but I think that it's a great way to show the care that the classroom teachers put into these resources, because they realize all the different ways teachers build lessons. Some want the resources alone. Some want a map. Some want to just focus on one map note. Some want a full lesson plan ready to go because my toolbox is full, my life is full. Others are like, I just want that document so I can edit it for myself. I want the answer key. All those things are provided. So I know I could go on, but I do gush when I talk about the teachers, but the commitment they put into making these some of the best story maps I've ever interacted with for the classroom. So we hope you share the same feelings as you work your way through them. So thanks for joining us today, and we're going to share this back with Andy to bring us home.
All right, sure. Yeah, thanks for everyone for joining us. Thanks if you're checking this out on YouTube. Certainly post a comment there if you have any questions. Like Chris said and Georgianne said, there's so many great resources contained just within these two. There's so many great activities, contained just within these two great resources. I know I was really looking forward this year, 2020, of using that story map in my classroom as I settle in and push content out to my students for the remainder of the year. As they're on homeschool, I'm going to be sending a lot of this out to them, kind of picking that story map apart and really having them dig into the Cold War with it. So thanks for joining us today, and be safe, everyone.